Good morning from New Zealand. Welcome back, another live stream from HowtoDandD. Now, I'm a little bit rough today. I have been sick, so I do apologise if my voice sort of cracks and falls apart partway through the stream. Let's hope that doesn't happen. I'm going to be talking about Fizban's Treasury of Dragons, player options. I've gone through all of it. This is really for players rather than for dungeon masters, this particular live stream. There's probably going to be some stuff here that dungeon masters might find useful, but frankly I think it's mostly for players. So my suggestion is grab some food, some drink, get comfortable, get ready. We're going to do this, and I have every intention of running a poll. This is probably going to be fairly swift to ensure that I do not sort of go too long and wind up hurting myself. So that's the plan. We seem to be doing all right here in terms of sound. So now that we've said the basics, settle back, get ready, and hopefully you get a nice impartial review. Yeah, the reviews are never impartial, but it should be at least slightly entertaining. Hi, welcome to HowtoDandD. My name is Fred Wheeler, and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. And I'm not here to talk about the Dragonborn. The Dragonborn is one of my favourite races in Dungeons and Dragons. I know it's not everybody's favourite, but this is a player review of Fizban's Treasury of Dragons for the Dungeons and Dragons 5e game. I've been wanting to talk about this book for a while. I have been unsure how to deliver that material. I have decided that the best way to do this is to break things up a little bit, and so that's why I'm doing it this way today. Okay, so I have a number of notes. I'm going to make it clear now that not everything that I have to say about the book you're probably going to like hearing. There'll be some things you may like and other things you probably will not like. That's just the very nature of all of this sort of stuff when you do a review, okay? So the first thing I'm going to say is that this book review is primarily from the player's perspective. So I am a dungeon master, but I also play characters, so I know what it's like when you're playing a character, and how I sort of see things is there's a good chance that given all the information that you present here, that you wind up sort of mixing things up. This is why I wanted to separate it, because it's hard to talk from a dungeon master perspective and a player perspective in the same video. So this is why I'm splitting this, and this is why you've noticed I've done this with Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, and I'm going to do the same thing. Just because I'm doing a player perspective live stream does not mean I will not cover it from a dungeon master perspective. I will talk from a dungeon master perspective in the future, but just not today. Primarily, I believe this book is designed for dungeon masters. It is a dragon source book, but it does have or include a handful of playable character races. Not necessarily that much, but there is some stuff here. The front cover art depicts a red and crystal ancient dragon clashing in battle in the air, while the wizard Fizban is casting some sort of protective shield spell. I like the image. I think it's quite clever. I'm quite a big fan of this. I think this standard artwork is superior to the alternative art piece, which is just two dragons. Now, you don't have to agree with me, but I personally like the standard artwork over the alternative artwork. And I think because you get an idea of the scope by having characters on the mountainside, you get an understanding of what is going on, that players' characters are not necessarily going to be involved in these sorts of battles, that they may simply be bystanders, and I like that kind of concept. The interior artwork is a mix of amazing dragon-themed full-page spreads. They've got some very nice pieces. And then there's quite a lot of colourful television cartoon characters in here. I don't know, is it my imagination, but I do feel like it harkens back to Dungeons & Dragons 4e. Now, I'm not saying that all Dungeons & Dragons 4e artwork was bad, because I don't think it was, but I feel like that art style and way of depicting things is certainly showing up here in this book. And it has been appearing and frankly all of the Wizards of the Coast books. And you might say, well, it's always been there, but I don't really feel like the Player's Handbook depicted characters like that. You had that watercolour, and I don't really like watercolour that much, but what I do know is that the watercolour that they have been doing in the Monster Manual and the Player's Handbook I really did like, but they've shifted over to what I can only describe as the sort of the new fangled digital art, and it does feel like a very cartoony depiction. I'm not a fan of it. The Dragonborn race has been rightfully improved by upgrading its breath weapon to be better than cantrip damage, which is good, but they've also placed restrictions on using it that I don't think are necessary. It has such a short range. The problem with the breath weapon on the Dragonborn was that people wanted to use it as their standard attack rather than swinging a sword. It really wasn't something you used if you are a spellcaster. But if you were in the front line and up close, this was sort of conceivably in people's head an option, because you could hit multiple targets and it didn't matter if you only got to use your breath weapon once, as long as it did enough damage and you could hit enough targets. I think restrictions on this were totally unnecessary. I don't think it was necessary to do in the slightest, and it still, I don't believe it would have been overpowered because the range on a breath weapon is so short. You're really only able to hit those people in the front line. So if you're not standing in the front line, you're not going to be using it. That's generally going to be the case. The only time a wizard is going to be, or a sorcerer or a spellcaster is using this breath weapon as a Dragonborn is when things went totally wrong. Okay? The Dragonborn race still doesn't get dark vision or even any better senses, which doesn't make sense to me. I don't understand this. It has dragon ancestry. Dragons have dark vision and other perceptions. They're very good at picking out anything around them because they've got that sort of dragon sense to them. There's a lot going on for them. So why do Wizards of the Coast insist on having Dragonborn having inferior senses, no dark vision, there's no extra benefit? Yes, I know the argument is balance of play, but it's also got to make sense, okay? And for me, it doesn't make sense. And because so many Dungeons & Dragons 5e races already have dark vision, why are we skimping on the Dragonborn? Is it because we've given them a better breath weapon? Is that the reason? The breath weapon is essentially replacing your melee attacks now. That's really all it does, okay? As long as it's on par with that, people will use it. And if you're into multi-classing and power gaming, you probably won't, because there'll be easier ways to make your weapons do more damage, and the breath weapon won't be an option. So I didn't think that having no dark vision for the Dragonborn was a smart idea. In my opinion, I think it's stupid. And just to shift over very quickly, if I was the Dungeon Master, I would be inclined to add dark vision to the Dragonborn, just because it makes more sense to me, frankly. Or at least give them advantage on perception checks. That's all I'm thinking needed to be done. I'm happy to have less races with dark vision, but the one race that makes sense to have dark vision is definitely Dragonborn. Okay, there are 3 Dragonborn types. There is the Chromatic, the Gem, and the Metallic. So Chromatic, Gem, Metallic. Now, with each type having a range of different colours associated with them, which means that the way that they work is slightly different in terms of their damage output and the kind of resistances that they have to damage. So that all sort of is affected by their ancestry. The Chromatic Dragon at level 5 gets damage immunity for 1 minute related to their dragon ancestry. So it's only going to be 1 damage type, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a very strong ability. 1 minute, that's a whole combat for sure. And it's immunity. It's not resistance. It means you are not affected by that damage type at all. It's very strong, but it's also situational. I don't have a problem with situational. I don't think that it's necessarily... I mean, the pure blood Yuan-Ti is... it had issues because it was immune to stuff, and so you could say, well, this is venturing into the same realm. I'm not sure that I am convinced that that's really something to concern yourself with. I think that's probably fine, and it's a limited use ability too. It's not like you get to use it that often. The Gem Dragonborn at 5th level gets Flight for 1 minute. It's pretty good, which is very useful. That means you don't have to worry about having the Fly spell or any other features. It just doesn't make any sense. It's not like this. The Gem Dragonborn has wings, and it's not like you can use the Flight all the time. It's just like single use, and then you long rest, I believe, and then you can use it again. Now this is game balance coming into play because you're playing something. Now the problem I find with this is it just doesn't make sense. Why give them Flight if we can't just give them Flight all the time? An Aarakocra can fly all the time. You can play an Owlin and they fly all the time. You are restricting this access at level 5. There's no restriction on Aarakocra and there's no restriction on the Owlin. Is it trying to make sure that you can have a flying character but not all the time so that the Dungeon Master won't say ban it from the game? Possibly that's what's going on here. Okay, the Metallic Dragonborn at 5th level gets a more powerful breath weapon with extremely potent spellcasting effects. I'm actually quite shocked at how strong it is. It's a little bit hard to imagine how that managed to get past everybody, but it did. It is probably the only aspect to this particular Dragonborn that I'm wondering about. Now, it's not damage output, okay? This powerful breath weapon gives you extremely potent secondary effects. It's not damage output. It's a secondary effect. And you might say, well, secondary effects aren't quite as important. And I would tend to agree with you. I think you're probably right. But there's very few abilities that can do what this Dragon Breath can do now. I like it. It's seriously, to be able to push somebody around so easily, it's very, very strong. It's a long distance. I just don't know that it actually makes sense again. I feel like it's another ability that it's cool, it's mechanical, but doesn't make sense for the race at all in terms of what it is doing. Does it actually make sense? I'm not sure that it does. I'm going to say this though. Why can't Dragonborn change the shape of their breath weapon? You get either a line or a cone, basically. But you can't change it. Depending on your dragon ancestry, you're predetermined to having either a line or a cone. You do not get to choose. Now, is this game balance? I don't know. I'm not sure that it was necessary. Would that really be narratively and mechanically silly or overpowered? I don't know that it would be mechanically or narratively silly. Now, you could say, based on the dragon ancestry, certain dragons, their dragon breath is specifically stated as a cone or a line. And because of that, they are just making sure that the breath weapons from those ancestries fall in line for the Dragonborn. They fall in line with the original dragon ancestry and the dragon that they're based on. And okay, I'm not going to dispute that. That makes sense. But it's not a true dragon either. And since we're supposedly trying to make something that's very much like a dragon, but not really a dragon, since it isn't a dragon, it's a humanoid. It's classified. It's not classified as a dragon. It's classified as a humanoid. So that's one part that I didn't really like. There's only 2 new subclasses, but they fit the classes selected. I have to agree with the selection, although I would like to point out that the druid gets left out. I mean, so do all the other classes, but if you're going to have any kind of subclass for a dragon, why is the druid excluded? Now, you could say, well, because the druid's already extremely OP and powerful. You could say the same thing about a wizard. I totally get that. I think that certain types of druids are fairly powerful, But it's not like you need to make a subclass for a dragon, for a druid, that's combat focused. You can go a different route. Not everything needs to be about combat. I know that's the shiny thing that a lot of people like, but I didn't like the fact that they left out the druid in this book. Just need a drink of water. Now, the way of the ancestral dragon monk, I think it's probably my favourite out of all of them. But then I am biased to wizards and monks. Let's make it clear, I am biased, okay? It covers all three pillars as far as I can tell in terms of playing the game. You can speak Draconic, which is great, should be there. You can fly. You can breathe like a dragon. You can fight blind, which makes sense because to a certain extent, dragons have the ability to actually fight and they don't need to see where things are, right? Invisibility in a dragon doesn't work. So I like the idea they have included limited blind fight. They have resistance to damage. Great, makes sense. We already kind of have that with the Dragonborn, but if you don't want to play a Dragonborn and you just want to play a monk that's an ascended dragon monk, then this is the one to go for, right? And then you can change your damage types and you can explode. There's a lot of combat stuff here. What I did notice about this particular monk is it's not a key-hungry monk subclass. It's very rare to see this. A lot of the abilities that this monk gets are not dependent on using key. Finally, it has been so frustrating to see this happen. I don't disagree that key should be a resource that you can use, and some of the features and abilities that a monk has will use up key. But there's lots of stuff here that doesn't require key. And I think we need to look back at some of the older monks and start thinking, are there some abilities here that did they really need to have key tied to them? Finally, they've got it right as far as I'm concerned. The Drakewarden Ranger is very interesting. It's not a versatile subclass in any way, but it will dominate the battlefield with the Drake companion that it gets. And it's eventually going to be able to be ridden, flying, and then eventually as a flying mount, you can actually ride it without it being able to fly. So there's a progression to it, which is quite cool. You get assignable increased damage resistance, which is quite unusual. I didn't know how to express this. I mean, how do you say getting assignable increased damage resistance? There's a bit of play. There's a bit of there's some options in here, which I thought was quite interesting. You don't often see this. Usually you're tied down to something and that's it. And then you get, oh my gosh, you get a mighty breath weapon, which frankly I think is comparable with Fireball, easily. It may not sit right there straight away, but oh my gosh, it's definitely comparable with Fireball. Of course, it doesn't cover as large an area as Fireball, obviously, but the breath weapon is just bat crazy. This is the one feature that concerns me, because I think that breath weapon, even though it's limited use, there may be some dungeon masters who decide it's not going to be in my game. I feel like maybe they should have toned down a little bit on that breath weapon, because it is, there aren't too many classes that have anything like it. If you think about a lot of the classes that are available outside of spellcasters using Fireball, there's very few subclasses from other classes that actually have an ability that is as powerful as this. Now, granted, you get it at higher level, but even at higher level, often subclasses and classes don't get anything like this. This mighty breath weapon of theirs is like, it's another step up. So a little concerning that dungeon masters might decide to ban it, and understandable that they might do so, unfortunately. I think all of the subclasses make excellent options for a game if you want to play them, particularly for Dungeons & Dragons Adventurers League. the public games that Wizards of the Coast and their Play Network operate. I think in a home game, I think you'll find that the way of the Ascended Dragon Monk is one that Dungeon Masters will probably have no issue with. I think there'll be a few Dungeon Masters who will have issue with the Drakewarden Ranger. And you might just say, well, but Rangers are underpowered as it is in combat. Yeah, but Rangers are also like the strongest outside of combat. And now with this thing, my group has played through. We've had a Gloomstalker Ranger in our group in the past, and we all decided in the end to ban the Gloomstalker Ranger from our game. Even the power gamers decided it was just too much. And I am a little concerned that it might fall into the same bracket again. Right, now, there are some things in here that aren't necessarily tied to player options, but there actually are player options. I will get to them, but I wanted to say just quickly that the subclass origin tables are very good for story and flavor additions. I actually liked them. I'm glad they included them in the book. They're excellent. The Draconic character ties offers some flavor backstory ideas for your classes. So the different classes, if you want to have some dragon flavor tied to your class or your character, you can do this. It's not something that has any mechanical benefit. It's just there. Now, I think that there'll be some players who will be happy with this, but I think there'll be a few people who will be quite annoyed that this thing exists, particularly since they don't plan to play a monk or a ranger or a sorcerer where there are subclasses where you can have a draconic sort of aspect to you. because there's no subclass with a draconic aspect to them unless you're playing a monk, a ranger, or a sorcerer, which is unfortunate. As I said, I think the Druid should certainly have had something like that. Now, the Draconic Feats section, I haven't seen this before. I mean, am I not paying attention to the player's handbook or something? But they actually put something in here that I've never seen before and I think is really good. And that is that the Draconic Feats section actually explains why a character might have a feat, which is handy for people who want a narrative reason. Not everybody cares about this sort of stuff. Okay? People are happy to make up their own reasons, which is fine. But suddenly we have a section that actually explains and gives you some options or some ideas about how you can describe that to your dungeon master and to yourself when you're building your character. And I think this is one of, even though it has no mechanical effect on the game whatsoever, and it's all just narrative and story based, I think it is, I'm glad to see it here. I hope they do, even if just a little bit, I hope they do that with a player's handbook when they reprint it in 2024. There are 3 Draconic Feats, the Chromatic, the Gem, and the Metallic. Now, these feats exist to give any class a Draconic or Dragon flavor and give them mechanics as well. Not just flavor, but mechanics. But they really are combat focused, and they are inferior to the other feat options you would find in the player's handbook. So I think most people will look at these feats and they probably won't take them. They'll opt for picking up and just being a Dragonborn, or they'll pick up the subclass, for the Ascended Dragon Monk, or the Drakewarden Ranger, or just the Draconic Sorcerer, and be done with it. I don't think these feats really did what they needed to do, unfortunately, which is a shame. I know their intention was to try to not have to make a subclass for every class in this book. Like that would have been just like bat crazy, right? So they tried to create these feats that would be able to sort of duplicate that, and they just made a spattering of subclasses for the ones they thought were the most important. I don't know how you feel about that. I don't know that it's necessarily going to work. Okay, Draconic Gifts aren't quite fully realized in this book. You get these Draconic Gifts, things that your character can gain, and they're underwhelming, they're lazy design, but they're not game breaking. So it's not like you couldn't use them. They're certainly not game breaking, but they really, really are lazy, and they're quite odd. The worst offending Draconic gift that I can see is actually the Draconic Senses. Draconic Senses gives you improved senses, but you don't get dark vision, which most races have. Again, I go over this. If you're going to have a Draconic gift and it's Draconic Senses, why do you not have dark vision included? All that means is I'm going to exclude, as if I was dungeon mastering, I would exclude the feat or have to add it in. Why do it that way? I do not understand. It doesn't make sense. I know what they're trying to do. They're trying to balance things, but it's a Draconic gift. It's not something that a player gets to pick. Draconic gifts are assigned to a character, probably by the dungeon master. Okay? Draconic gifts are more a reward. So it didn't need to exclude that. There is one Draconic gift that I need to talk about, and that is Tongue of the Dragon. Is the only one that I consider to be well designed. You can speak Draconic, read and write it. Perfectly makes perfect sense. That's good. And you can also be heard up to 300 feet away. You're audible, so you can yell. This is going to be useful for intimidating somebody if you wanted to. And also being able to communicate at a long distance, particularly if it's difficult to do so. So I can see people being able to utilize that, and then you also get advantage on persuasion checks. So, the public speaker is here. I think this is the only one. Now, these are minor benefits in the game. Nothing game-breaking whatsoever, okay? But it's the only one that I consider to be fully realized. All the rest just sort of fell short. The Draconic Gifts are a bit like a magic item or a boon, if you know what they are. I'm talking about from the Dungeon Master Guide, or feats. They're a little bit like that, but you can't trade them. They can't be passed on to someone else because they are specifically connected to a character as a reward, as I said. So if your character dies, that Draconic gift is lost. That's it. It is either assigned to you a number of ways, and I think the options they presented are something like you earn it because you defeated a dragon, or you earn it because you are working for a dragon and they have decided that you are going to be rewarded with this Draconic gift. So, again, I don't think they needed to be quite so stingy with Draconic gifts, since it's a thing that dungeon masters will award. Anyway. Draconic magic or dragon magic spells. There's there's nothing in the dragon magic spells that is going to add anything compared to the player's handbook. Right? Most of it is fairly standard stuff. You know, it's your normal dragon sort of themed weapons, and that's it. And armor and stuff. Nothing that sort of really stands out in terms of spells. It's more combat stuff, right? That's the essential. And there's nothing there that you couldn't replace with something from the player's handbook. There are 3 spells in here that stood out for me. That's the Draconic Transformation, where you basically transform into a dragon for a period of time. And then Fizban's Platinum Shield, which is extremely powerful. It's also a very high level spell. And then Summon Draconic Spirit, where you get to summon the spirit of a dragon to fight for you. So it's basically like summoning a creature, but you're not summoning a dragon as such. You're just summoning the spirit of a dragon that may have passed on. I guess that's the concept. Those 3 spells are the only ones that stood out thematically and mechanically as able to keep up with the player's handbook, in my opinion. Now, the magic items are the usual dragon-themed combat weapons, stuff like that. Yeah, look, There's nothing particularly special here. I would say there's 2 magic items that stand out. All the rest are sort of, who cares, okay? And that is the Potion of Dragon's Majesty, which basically allows you to drink this and transform into a dragon. And then you also get the gold canary figurine or wondrous power. So is it the gold canary figurine of wondrous power? Now you can transform this figurine into a canary, which is cool, but you can also transform it into a gold dragon. But once you do that, you can't use it for a very, very, very long time. So you can get a dragon ally from this magic item. But look, your whole campaign's probably going to end by the time you're able to use it again. I think this has been done deliberately by the designers. I totally understand why they've done so. The canary is still extremely cool and a nice idea. So it's not like you've been robbed with this magic item. I think those are the 2 magic items that stand out as being worthwhile in the game to include. The rest they could have just left out and forgot about it. Now, strangely, there is some stuff in the Dungeon Master sections that players could use. Now, I wasn't expecting this, but I'm going to point it out. There is a Dragon Hoard Mundane items table, okay? The Dragon Hoard Mundane items table can be used as a trinket table, as far as I can tell, with some unique and mysterious items. But it only has a few items, and some of the items would be too large to carry. They won't be small enough. So then again, the list gets shorter. But I like the concept, and there's still the opportunity, if you wanted to shrink down some of these items so they are a bit more manageable. You can stick them in a pocket or in a backpack or something like that. So I like their inclusion, and I do think that they could potentially be very, very interesting for players in the game, even if they don't find them in a Dragon Hoard and they have them straight off the bat. Okay? There's nothing in the bestiary for the players' characters because there's no beasts there, and everything is obviously a dragon. There's a few other creatures. There's very few things in here that you will be able to use playing a character to transform into, or transform somebody else into, or something else into, or to summon. Most of these things you'll never get to use. They're all really tools for a dungeon master rather than a player, unless you've got a dungeon master who's using sidekick rules and trying to modify some of the monsters in the back of the book. So unfortunately, nothing for you. I think that was quite sad. Why can we not have something in the range of beasts for players to include in their character? This was the time to do it. Or have you already done everything? Is there nothing else left? The book has no index, so you will have to do with the contents page. Look, the contents page, if you're a player, will probably allow you to find everything that you need. It might require a little bit of flipping through. The section's quite small, really, in terms of player character options. I do not like the fact that books don't have indexes, and I always beat up on Wizards of the Coast because rightfully and fairly they should have included them. There's only 224 pages in this book, which is quite small, and less than 20 pages present player character options. So that means that if you are only ever a player, the amount of stuff in here that's useful to you is very minuscule. There's hardly anything. Again, I like it when they put a poster map in the back, and there's no handy pull-out poster map or color poster map in the back. It doesn't have to be maps. It could be something else. But a poster map would have been awesome. Are they trying to save money? Well, obviously they're not trying to save money with every other product. So why is it they could not include it in this book? Again, another opportunity missed. Now, Fizban, what they've done is that they've got the character Fizban has quotes in the book, and they're written by Amy Vorpal, and they are the standard boring prattle, and they're quite confusing and nonsensical at times, I found them to be a waste of space in the book. I really didn't think they added anything. And I would like to make it clear that I usually like Amy's work. I actually like what Amy Vorpal does. In this case, I felt like she was just getting paid to do something for Wizards of the Coast. She took the job because it's Wizards of the Coast and it probably paid well, and it was an opportunity that she didn't have before, but it's not her best work. I think a lot of the other stuff that Amy Vorpal has done is significantly better, and the Fizban quotes could have easily been replaced with useful stuff that is missing from the book. Like a few more player options could have been there, or a few more Dungeon Master tools could have been there, and we could have just got rid of that. Why did it need to be called Fizbans in the first place? It could have just been the Treasury of Dragons, frankly. I know that's a hard thing to say for people to hear, but look, come on, just give us real stuff, not just waffle and junk. Okay, next. Ultimately, what do I think about this book? This book is not worth your expense if you are a player, in my opinion. If you're playing the game and you're playing characters and you never Dungeon Master and you'll never use any of the other content in this as a Dungeon Master, then I wouldn't really get it, because less than 1/10 of the book includes character options. If you are a player and a Dungeon Master, and you're likely to use the stuff in here as a Dungeon Master, then buy the book. But unless you're a Dungeon Master, this book really doesn't have anything for you. Nothing that I don't think will wind up being frustrating and just not giving you what you wanted in the first place. It's like a half measure. I hate to say it, but frankly, there's probably going to be somebody who will release something superior on the DM Guild, the Dungeon Master Guild. Somebody's going to see this and probably make something that's far superior than what you have in this book for players. Not necessarily for Dungeon Masters, but for players. In terms of what's in here, I'm going to talk about this in the future for Dungeon Masters. There's a lot of good stuff in here for Dungeon Masters. Not everything, but there is a lot of really, really clever stuff in here that is certainly worth your time. But that is for another day, not today. So hopefully this was useful to you. I'm hoping this was useful to you if you're a player. If it wasn't, I do apologize. I am just trying to be as honest as I can. I love playing Dragonborn. I love the idea of having a dragon character, and it is a little bit frustrating for me when I feel like they have missed the mark. And I do think with this book for player characters, they did miss the mark. Now, if you found this useful, fantastic. I actually have many reviews on various books. You're welcome to go and check those out if you want to. Live streams and edited versions. I have hundreds of videos for players and Dungeon Masters. You're welcome to go and watch. And also too, look, if you want to support the channel so I keep doing video content like this, you can through Patreon, the Amazon affiliate links down in the description, the merchandise shelf underneath all of my videos, or just watch my videos. Do the usual YouTube things, you know what I'm talking about. Share, like, and subscribe. Hit the bell button to be notified when I'm live, and I'm live every week, and when I publish new videos, and that happens too. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s. Okay, I'm not gone. Let's do some Q&A. I may need to use my eyes. I may not be able to read out everything because I'm actually losing my voice a little bit. I haven't been well, and so I was very tempted to. I was tempted to cancel this, but then I decided no, because like I'd done all the work. I felt like it was more sensible for me to just get it done. It wasn't a long process in terms of presenting everything, so that makes sense. There's a lot of bots today. I don't know why. How's it going, Overboard DM? Hi, Joe. How's it going? And then we got Draconic from Spain. Now, I don't know if I got your name right, Draconic. Did I get your name right? You'll let me know. I'm just while I'm while I'm saying hi to people, I'm actually doing my my bot disintegration protocol. That's when I go through and I see the bots and I report them to YouTube as unwanted garbage, and watch them disappear from the live stream chat. For those of you who are wanting me to do a review for Dungeon Masters on this book, it's going to happen. Okay, I think you'll find what I have to say in terms of a Dungeon Master about this book is far more positive than in terms of player options. Hi SWAT Cat, how's it going? Hi Pale Rider. Dear. Yeah, look, Pale Rider, hello. Yes, exactly. Look, there's not a lot of game balance going on nowadays in Dungeons and Dragons. There really wasn't anyway. Like Tasha's game balance went out the window, and game balance went out the window when we had the wizard, the druid, and the cleric in the game, and the paladin. Frankly, those are some of the most powerful and strongest classes, not necessarily at the very beginning of their play cycle, at the very lower levels. So, yeah, I don't know. Pick a party before the type of adventure. Oh, well, maybe. Palladium had a great, godling character races. Really? Did they? I'm not really familiar with it myself. I have been doing a lot of research recently on older versions of the games, and hate to say it, you guys are probably going to see a lot of stuff on my channel you've never seen before, and actually on anybody's channel. I'm quite deliberately doing that. What else you got here? Yeah, tiers of play for starting characters and power levels. I think Pale Rider, that's possible. Look, it's not like you can't start. You could start your game at level 1. You could start your game at level 3, level 5, level 8, level 10. It's a little rare for people to start a game at higher than level 1, 2, or 3, but it does happen. Hi, Steve. How's it going? Steve, Zurich is actually a patron and supports me on Patreon. And Steve has been... it's interesting. Steve just keeps saying, just keep doing what you're doing. So I have been just keep doing what I'm doing. So, Steve, you like the player options? As a whole, fair enough. Right. Yeah, so I'm always concerned that if they put out something and the Dungeon Master has to make too many alterations, they just won't use it. And I totally understand that. But for me, for the longest time, when I got the Player's Handbook, I wanted to change the Dragonborn. And I would sit there and I don't want to create, okay? I don't really want to create another Dragonborn. Why couldn't Wizards of the Coast have gotten it right the first time? Now, I think most of us know that when they put out the new Player's Handbook, that there'll be some changes to the Dragonborn race in there. And so they may fix those things. But I'm not concerned. I am concerned that there may be a chance that they'll still miss the mark because they didn't get it right as far as I can see with Fizbans. I'm still waiting for them to release information about playtesting the D&D Evolved game. I am a little concerned that maybe they've decided to keep it behind closed doors, and the only input that you'll get is a couple of surveys every once in a while, and that would be bad. That would be really bad. Because from all accounts I can see them working their way back towards 4E, and I don't think 4E is the answer. I think that it's like trying to rehash 3.5. Okay, SWAT Cat, what do you got here? So that's the thing I found, SWAT Cat. the Gloomstalker Ranger is definitely one of the best Ranger subclasses. But yes, if you pair it with a Rogue Assassin to multi-class, it really is a murder in the dark, yeah. And that's what we found, is that it was because it existed and because you could multi-class with Rogue Assassin, it just did too much. It was overshadowing everybody and nobody could keep up with it. It certainly helped the players in certain circumstances, but ultimately I think it wasn't me who just said, look, we should ban the Gloomstalker Ranger. I was dungeon mastering. It's the players who said, look, I think we should get rid of it. There was one player out of 5 who said, no, I want to keep it because it is overpowered and da-da-da-da, and they weren't even playing the Gloomstalker Ranger. But everybody else, the person who built the Gloomstalker Ranger, Simon, one of my friends, he built another one. He's actually got a build that he sent me that's even more powerful than the one we used in our game. And so I'm supposed to do a video on the topic. I just, when I read his notes, I realized he's way smarter than I am, and I don't know how to decipher it. So I'm struggling to get that out as a video, a piece of content for you, okay, and present it to people. But we found that the person playing the character and the person who built the character, like, it's too much. We know it's too much. We don't want to include it. Now, so Draconic, I apologize if I got your name wrong. I think the Draconic Gifts are best fitted for sorcerers and warlocks, while the rest of the classes just get rewards with nope. Yeah, basically, yeah. Look, I don't even think that the warlock and the sorcerer is going to necessarily benefit that much from the Draconic Gifts. There's one Draconic Gift that I would consider utilizing as a dungeon master, and there's one Draconic Gift as a player that I would select. You don't have to agree with me though. What I am so glad that everyone that is put out is ultimately guidelines. I am so glad that everything that is put out is ultimately guidelines per the forward of every edition. Yep. Use what you want, ignore what you don't, and work with the players. Look, people will tweak things, but the more you have to tweak things, the harder and harder it gets for dungeon masters. Like, I think there's too many design factors in the background affecting their decisions, and this is why we're having some really weird stuff come out. Things that just don't quite hit the mark, or just go a bit too far over the top. Yeah. Am I being too critical? Maybe I am being too critical. Yeah, I'm going to try not to push it too hard. I'm supposed to be in a Dungeon Master round table, so I need to go and have a rest. It's a while. I've got a few hours. What do you got here, Steve? They are not outstanding, but again, they expand what they allow. Yeah, I think with the Dragonborn, I might just change the Dragonborn in the player's handbook, because I don't really like. I mean, the Dragon Breath is better. I'm glad they did something with the Dragon Breath, but everything else just doesn't seem to have done very much with it. Also, I have a friend who has loved playing the Dragonborn, though he is more excited by what is in Fizbans. Fair enough. That makes sense. What do you got here, Pale Rider? In other editions, based on XP, they balanced it with the number of XP to advance. Right. The new way of milestone markers should go away, in my opinion, for balance. So, I don't want to get rid of milestones. I like milestones, Pale Rider. I know what you're talking about, and yes, this is... Gary Gygax used experience points and restrictions. There was a lot of restrictions on classes and races and how they could be put together. All the reason for doing it, quite often, was nothing to do with just being prejudiced. It was more about trying to balance the game. Gary Gygax was about game balance. But then Dave Arneson wasn't. So a lot of the things we are seeing are carry-ons from what other people were playing in the Blackmore campaign with Dave Arneson, frankly. And they don't mesh well. I mean, why do we even bother with game balance if you have a wizard with fireball? Seriously? I'm not sure that it's quite as necessary to concern yourself with. And I would be happy if they just made a lot of the features more utility in nature and rather than combat, because utility is not usually a big deal for most dungeon masters. They're not usually going to say no to that. It's usually the combat stuff. Do you know what I mean? Anyway, I don't know what I'm going to be talking about next week. I'm still undecided. I suppose I should talk about the Dungeon Master tools, but I probably need to take a rest from that. Maybe I will talk about something like the Wild Beyond the Witchlight. I know a lot of people don't want me to talk about Battle Zoo Bestiary, but seriously, people, I've seen this book. It's quite amazing. I was really shocked at how good it was. This book is a third-party publisher created by people who, they're not game designers. It was part of a competition, and they've got some outstanding stuff in here. And then the player option stuff, a lot of it I don't usually care about, but they do so much with monster bits and monster parts. Like, everything you would ever want and desired to have in your game, they put into this book, and they've done it really well. And it's almost system agnostic. You could do it in any game and it wouldn't matter. I'm going to end this poll. So 50% like the player options. There's nobody who dislikes them. Some of the options, 33% like some of them, not all of them, and 17% are undecided. Okay. Unrelated, what is your personal favourite Wizards of the Coast campaign? It's Curse of Strahd. Sorry, it's Curse of Strahd. That's my favourite one. Look, to be fair, if I had to pick a campaign book, though, I've got it right beside me. I've been using it a lot. My favourite campaign book is Mythic Odysseys of Theros. This is an outstanding book. For a dungeon master, it's outstanding. It's got so much really cool stuff here. I'm really impressed. I'm glad they made it. Well done. And the more and more I go through it, the more and more I realise that what they've done in this book, they should have done in Fizban's. Like, if they had done what they did in this book here, which they did so well, in Fizban's, we would have had a knock it out of the park book. Absolutely. Now, to be fair, there's no poster map in this book. But this book is still really, really good. I think superior in many ways to Fizban's. But this is not about Theros. It's a Greek knockoff by Wizards of the Coast, which is basically what Theros is. So anyway, I'm hoping that this was useful to you. I do apologise that I am not able to sort of hang around and talk for very long, but I'm not feeling that great. It's time to take a rest. So thank you for everybody who showed up. Thank you for my patrons for supporting me. Thank you to everybody who's been watching my videos. I do appreciate it. And I know some of them are very long. And certainly when you sit down and watch a live stream, that can take a long time. So I do appreciate it. So wherever you are in the world, whether it be the morning, the afternoon, or the night, or the wee early morning, please look after yourself, your family, and your friends. Be nice to your neighbours. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s. Thank you, Slick Nasty.